Hello everyone, welcome back to your favorite YouTube channel, Snowps Up. I am Weber, back with another exciting learning topic, Snowflake's newly introduced table type, dynamic tables. In this video, we are going to check what are dynamic tables, how they work, how to create them, and what are their use cases. So stay tuned till the end of this video. But before going to start, if you are new to this channel, hit the like button, share, and don't forget to subscribe so I can make more such content for you. Imagine friends, you have a table of data and you want to organize the data in a specific way. Normally, you might create a new table and every time you have to write an SQL query to update it whenever the original data changes. But now, instead of doing that, we are going to create dynamic tables and write simple SQL statement of which data you want to organize from our base table. So, dynamic tables will keep itself refreshed automatically with our SQL statement of which data we want to update it or organize it from our base table data. Okay, and dynamic table will always keep itself updated with our SQL statement. So dynamic tables are like a smart tables. They make our work more convenient and automated for us. So let's get started. So friends, as you can see, this is a slide I have made for you. So in this slide, we are going to see definition of dynamic tables, syntax of dynamic table, examples and use cases. So what is dynamic table? Dynamic tables are building blocks of declarative data transformation pipelines. So dynamic tables are they are in the declarative transformation pipelines form. They are specific table type in Snowflakes, lets you define your data pipeline using simple SQL statement. As I said earlier, we have to just write a simple SQL statement. We don't need to write and complex SQL query or copy into statement every time whenever the original data changes. We have to just mention a simple SQL statement while creating the dynamic table. Okay. Instead of writing complex ETL code, you define the desired data transformation and materialization directly in the table definition. Dynamic tables automatically refresh and update themselves whenever the underlying data changes. As you can see, I said earlier, dynamic tables automatically refreshes itself whenever the underlying data changes. Means whenever the original data from the base table gets changed, dynamic table will update itself with the your SQL statement of which data you want to organize, ensuring your data is always current and refreshed. So this is an example of architecture of dynamic tables. In this diagram, you can see there are three tables, one base table A, base table B, and dynamic table C. And we are going to combine their data and store their data in two different dynamic tables. And here, as you can see, the automated refresh process dynamic table will do. We are going to combine base table A data and base table B data to store it in dynamic table A with specific SQL statement of which data from table A and table B we want to store in our dynamic table A. Same for the base table B and dynamic table C. Here we are going to use dynamic table. So we will combine both tables data and write simple SQL query to store the data in dynamic table B. Syntax. So friends, as you can see here, this is an dynamic table syntax. Whenever we going to create dynamic table, we will use this type of syntax. In this syntax, as you can see, there is a create or replace dynamic table, and here you will mention your dynamic table name. Then here comes target lag. In the target lag, you will mention a number, and whenever what time of when the dynamic table get refreshed itself, that time you will mention here in seconds, minutes, hours and days, and also in the downstream. Downstream means the dynamic table will update itself whenever it wants to get change, or it should means it dynamic table will determine itself when the data updated and update to itself. Okay, then we use downstream. Warehouse. Dynamic tables will need a compute engine, which means warehouse. We will mention here warehouse name. And refresh mode. In the refresh mode, there are auto, full and incremental. We are going to check further in detail. Initialize, on create or on schedule. On schedule means when we are on creating dynamic table, it will initialize the refresh, or on schedule, one for specific time lag or time schedule, you want to initialize the refresh. And our SQL query, SQL statement of which data you want to organize. So this is a simple syntax. So name specifies the identifier for the dynamic table, must be unique for the schema in which dynamic table is created. So name will be unique. Okay, the target lag. It is an important concept in the dynamic table. So target lag, as I said earlier, target lag we mention in time, as a time when the dynamic table should refresh itself. Okay, we can set it for seconds, minutes, hours and days also, and as I said, downstream also. So number, seconds, minutes, hours and days specifies the maximum amount of time that the dynamic table's content should lag behind updates to the base tables. For example, if the data in the dynamic table should lag by no more than 5 minutes, specify 5 minutes. Same for the hours, days also. Downstream specifies that the dynamic table should be refreshed only when dynamic tables which depend on it are refreshed. Warehouse specify the name of the warehouse that provides the compute resources for refreshing the dynamic table. You must have the privilege. But before using that, you should have the privilege to use the warehouse in order to create the dynamic table. So refresh mode. What is refresh mode? Specifies the refresh type for the dynamic table. This property cannot be altered after the create of dynamic table. You cannot change the refresh type after being created the dynamic table. You have to mention it when you are going to create the dynamic table. So there is 3 types in refresh mode: auto, full and incremental. In auto, enforces an incremental refresh of the dynamic table by default. If the create dynamic table statement does not support the incremental refresh mode, the dynamic table is automatically created with refresh mode, fully refresh mode. Okay, by default it will take a full refresh mode. Full enforces a refresh of the dynamic table even if the dynamic table can be incrementally refreshed. So it will, if you select the full refresh mode, it will update itself fully. So whenever the data gets changed and the target lag is set, within the target lag it will refresh itself fully. And if you set it incrementally, it will change itself only the data with the new data of updated data. Yeah. So what is the initialize? Specifies the behavior of initial refresh of the dynamic table. This property cannot be altered, same as the refresh type also. While creating, you have to mention the initial type. It cannot be altered. You create the dynamic table. To modify the property, replicate the dynamic table with a create or replace dynamic table command. After being created the dynamic table, if you want to change the initialize, you have to duplicate the dynamic table for that. Okay. As you can see, the initialize in on create and on schedule. On create, refresh the dynamic table synchronously at creation, and in on schedule refreshes the dynamic table at the next scheduled refresh. Okay, by default it will take on create initialize type. So with the example, we are going to check an example. So in this example, friends, we are going to create the dynamic table materialize the result of a query of product ID and product name columns of staging table data. Here you can see we are going to create a dynamic table called product. Okay, and the target lag is set on 20 minutes. We are going to use a compute engine warehouse, my warehouse, and simply, as I said earlier, in the dynamic table we use simple SQL statement. We don't need to write a complex SQL query or complex SQL statement to copy that data every time whenever the data changes. We just mention the what columns we want from our base table. Suppose you have a base table of educational data, student ID, student name, student division, student standard, and you just want to organize the data of student ID and student name. You will create another dynamic table and you will simply write an SQL statement of I just want student ID and student name on this dynamic table. So dynamic table will update itself with only the SQL statement as we have written of a student ID and student name. Whenever the data get inserted in the base table or whenever the data gets changed in the base table of our original data, and dynamic table will only keep a student ID and student name in dynamic table itself. So here we have selected product ID and product name from our base table. As you can see here, the dynamic table materializes the result of a query of the product ID and product name columns of the staging table data. And here we have mentioned from which table, which base table we want these columns from staging table. In the target lag time is set on 20 minutes, which means the data in the dynamic table should ideally be no more than 20 minutes older than the data in the staging table. before 20 minutes it will go to the base table and check if the data is changed or not every time. That automated refresh process uses the compute resources in warehouse, my warehouse, to refresh the data in the dynamic table. So use cases. What are the use cases for this dynamic table? So dynamic tables are best used when you don't want to write code to track that data dependencies and manage data refreshes. You don't need or want to avoid the complexity of stream and task. You don't need to create streams and tasks in the dynamic table. You don't need to materialize the result of query in multiple base tables. We also can, as we have seen the architecture of dynamic table of example, we can use multiple base tables from the data and select and organize the data and put the data in our dynamic table. We can use multiple base tables and we can use their columns of data which we want and store it in our dynamic table. You need to build multiple tables to transform data via an ETL pipeline. You don't need to fine-grained refresh schedule control, and you just want to specify the target data freshness of your pipeline. So as you can see, this is the use cases of our dynamic tables. Now friends, we are going to do an hands-on lab and actual practical of dynamic tables. Okay. So friends, as you can see here, we are going to create, and we will need firstly a database and a schema in which our base table is situated and our dynamic table we are going to create. So in this example, we are going to create a database called dynamic DB. So our database has been created. Then we are going to create a schema called dynamic schema. Okay. So for this example, we are going to create two base tables. One is employee and second one is employee skills. In the first table, in the first base table, we have columns employee ID, employee name and employee address. We are going to simply create the base table and we will insert some data into it. So as you can see, we are going to insert employee values here. First 1, 2, 3 and 4. 4 employees are there with their names and with their addresses.
There.
Okay. Our base table 1 has been created successfully and inserted the data. So let's check the employee base table. So friends, as you can see here, the employee IDs are here, employee name and employee addresses. Now we have to create another base table. Okay. There is no need, it is not necessary. You want multiple base tables always. You can simply use one base table and organize that base tables data in dynamic table also. But in this example, we are going to use multiple base tables. Means we are going to use here two base tables, employee and employee skills. In the second employee skills table, we are going to use columns skill ID, employee ID, skill name and skill level. Our base table B has been created successfully. we are going to insert the data in the base table B. So what we have inserted, there are some skills and skill level, Snowflake, Python, SQL. Okay, so as you can check here, the employee skill table has been created, and the skill ID and employee ID matches with the first base table. So skill names are Snowflake, Python, SQL. Okay, but for this, whenever we create base tables or whenever we create refresh standard tables, the automatic refreshed has been disabled by default. It will enable only when we create dynamic tables. So as you can see here, I will show you. I have write an SQL statement of show tables. Here you can see we have created two base tables, employee and employee skill, database name, schema name, kind, and how many rows are there, who is the owner, retention time, automatic clustering is off, and change tracking is important here. Change tracking, as you can see, change tracking is by default disabled. If we want to refresh the data automatically, we will need to enable the change tracking. Okay, and when the change tracking will be enabled, when we create the dynamic table. Now we will create one dynamic table called employee details. As you can see the syntax, create or replace dynamic table employee details. The target lag will be 1 minute and warehouse will be compute warehouse. And our simple SQL statement will be, we are going to select here from table A employee ID, employee name, and from table B skill ID, skill name, and skill level. We don't want to use employee addresses from our base table A, so we don't mention here. And from where we want to get the data, from employee table A and employee skills table B, where employee ID from table A and employee ID from table B are equal and ordered by skill ID. So we are just simply going to create our dynamic table. So our dynamic table has been created. Simply we are going to select start from. So friends, as you can see here, this is our dynamic table, employee IDs, employee name. We don't want our employee addresses. See, we have created one employee address column in the base table, but we don't mention it in the while creating the dynamic table. So we have took the employee ID, employee name, skill ID, skill name, and skill level. What we are going to check here, the employee 1 Srushti having the skill ID Snowflake in its advanced level. Okay, same for the Vaibhav, skill ID 1 Snowflake having the skill level is advanced. Amol also having Snowflake skill level advanced level, and Srushti will have the skill name Python, the skill level is basic. So now to check how the dynamic table refreshes itself, we are going to update our base tables. So update employee skills means our base table B. Set skill level to low, where employee ID 1 means here employee name is Srushti, employee ID 1 and skill name is Snowflake. So as you can see, earlier it was at the advanced level. Now we are going to update it to the low level. Okay. So simply check the employee skill table, means table B. Yes, here as you can see here in the base table data has been changed. Okay, so now the dynamic table, we have set our target lag at 1 minute. So now it will take 1 minute or less than 1 minute to refresh itself. The dynamic table will refresh itself, and we should have the change data in our dynamic table. So as you can see, okay, now this is our dynamic table. The data has not been changed yet because we set the target lag to 1 minute. Okay, so we have to wait for 1 minute. Friends, dynamic table is a very interesting and very important concept in world of tables. Snowflake introduced dynamic tables is very useful and very convenient for us, because when we want to organize the data from our base tables, and normally we have to create a standard table and update it every time, but after creating the dynamic table we don't need to create any of the things. After creating dynamic table will update itself automatically and refresh itself automatically, and we will get always the fresh data. Okay, so we will again query. So as you can see here, friends, we have our data has been changed in our dynamic table. Srushti earlier her skill was Snowflake at skill level advanced, but now the skill level is set to be low. So the dynamic table update itself automatically from the base table. Okay, so that's it, friends. That's all for the today's video. But friends, I am going to one thing I will show you. When we create dynamic table, we can see the graph also. The graph in the normal tables, we cannot check the graph of what table we have created or how the table has been created. Okay, we simply have the things, table details, columns, data preview and copy history. But in the dynamic tables, here you can see refresh history also. So in the refresh history, we have set the target lag to 1 minute, right? Time within target lag is 97%. So as you can see, only one query has took the time of 1 minute and 2 seconds, and all the queries are within the 1 second of time period. The maximum time lag was 1 minute and 4 seconds. Okay, yeah, here. Okay, so here is the graph. As you can see here, friends, we have put the dynamic table on our two base tables here, employee and employee skills. We have created our dynamic table over our two base tables here. So in this graph, we can check the target lag, maximum target lag, what warehouse says, and what is the refresh mode, incremental. It will automatically took the refresh mode to incremental, because by default it will take incremental refresh mode. Okay, and one more thing. Sure. Okay, as I have shown you earlier, the refreshed change tracking was disabled. Okay, but when we create the dynamic table, now you can see the change tracking has been enabled automatically. we don't return any query to enable the change tracking. It will automatically